It's done very quickly, but the calf doesn't die immediately. For some reason, the calf's heart isn't taken, and I don't know. It seems like it's still living, and that upset me very much. And then I can see the calf being lowered. It's like it's being dropped back down. And when it's on the ground, it's dead. I can see that it's not moving.
It's a calf about halfway up, up in the air. And it's in this light, and it's moving around. It's trying to get away, or it's trying to get out. It's scared. I guess it's afraid it's going to drop.
Hello, welcome back to UFO Update Live. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our panel. To my right is my wife and co-host, Peggy Black. Peggy is a member of the Center for UFO Studies. She also has her own support group, which is in its first year now. To my immediate left here is Pat Packard. He's Assistant State Director for the Mutual UFO Network in Ohio. He's also president of his own group, ASK, Associates for Scientific Knowledge. Welcome, Pat.
Thanks.
Brian Scal is next. Brian Scal is a UFO investigator and researcher and is working towards his degree in physics. Brian, also welcome.
Thanks.
And of course, on the end is Terry Enders. Terry Enders is a UFO researcher and investigator and is the publisher of our newsletter, UFO Update newsletter. Thank you very much, Terry.
Thank you.
Tonight we're going to talk about an interview we had with Lindo Moulton Howe recently. And Lindo Moulton Howe gave us panel a lot to think about in terms of evidence to support the fact that cattle mutilations are not the work of predators or of cults or insects or anything else of that nature. She had a lot to say, but the point is, what evidence does she really have to back up what she's saying? She presented a lot of evidence. Pat, you've been working diligently the last month or so, working on evidence for the idea that cattle mutilations is something serious, and we should take it seriously and look at it in a serious vein. Some researchers, though, Pat, have marked this off their list without even giving it any second thought. So you've taken the time and effort to study it recently. What are your thoughts, and what did you find out?
Well, first, let me comment on the opening tape there. The only evidence in 30 years that we've had, any eyewitness testimony, are people that have seen essentially aliens or UFOs, animals being lifted in a beam of light. Now, over 30 years, we probably have a dozen or so people like that. Now, that to me is not conclusive proof that aliens are doing it. There's other forensic proof, and the only forensic proof that we've had are things like pod marks and things like that. But as far as what Linda had to say, as you know, we've contacted quite a few people, academics that are not in the UFO community, Kansas State, Ohio State, University of Denver, many, many people. And they all seem to validate what Linda had to say. I talked to the chief investigator for New Mexico yesterday. He's convinced that something extraordinary is taking place. I talked to the police officers in Fife, Alabama. You name it. We've sought these people out and talked to them to verify what Linda had to say and to find out for ourselves, which is what we do, what the truth is in this matter. And one thing I'd have to say is something extraordinary is happening, something out of the ordinary that can't be explained in everyday prosaic terms. And they don't know, and I certainly don't know at this point in time what's doing it, but it defies our current scientific abilities. They can do things that we simply can't do with modern technology as far as removing organs and draining blood and so many other things. And of course, all these years, no arrest, no nothing. So it's quite a puzzle.
Why do you think this has gained the attention of ufologists in recent years as opposed to, this started back in 1967 with a horse that was found dead, and there's been continual cattle mutilation, especially in the 70s, in Colorado and other areas in Alabama. Right. Why is it just now being taken somewhat seriously by ufologists?
Well, it's like everything else in ufology, like the rest of the communities. We have sort of levels of belief we go to. You know, at first people won't accept lights in the sky, and then abductions, possibly, and so forth and so on. And this is one of these things that, as we go along, the proof seems to mount up, and it's just become undeniable. I've entered as a skeptic myself to some degree, and after talking to so many people, FBI people, cult experts, and others, I couldn't find one person that had actually been on the site of an animal mutilation to deny that this was happening. They all said it was happening, and it's not cults and it's not predators.
I think one reason why this is so important, Pat, is because we only have two areas of possible ufology involvement that we can really pinpoint and say, here's some physical evidence. That's, in my opinion, crop circles and cattle mutilations.
Right.
We certainly don't have any hardware from any UFO spacecraft, if that indeed is the answer. So you would think that ufologists would be heavy into the scene of this cattle mutilation until it was solved. My opinion is if the eyes are removed and the tongue is removed surgically almost, as if by the hands of a surgeon, then we're dealing with something else than predators or cults. And we could be dealing with government. I guess that's a possibility. But it needs to be studied, not just overlooked and passed. We have physical evidence that we can constantly keep referring to.
Yeah, well, fortunately, we have some people out there that are sticking to it. And you'll find that many people, and I found, and Lindo Moulton Howe found, will say one thing in public, but off the record, they'll tell you, hey, we just don't know what's going on here. But they're not willing to stick their neck out in public and risk their reputations and conceivably their jobs and what have you. And it's the laugh factor. You know, they're afraid that someone is going to laugh at them, and that seems to stymie a lot of people in America from taking a look at a whole lot of different things that take place.
I understand that. You've done a lot of great work on this, Pat. I really appreciate it. Peggy, you have a question for Brian?
Brian, in the clip we saw two people who actually witnessed cattle being drawn up into a light. Is this a frequent or just an occasional occurrence?
Well, I think for most of the occurrences, it's really unwitnessed. The cattle is found the next day, and they find it mutilated. But it has happened quite often. Like Pat said, there's really no evidence to show that we have a cult or even the government. It's really unexplainable. But the fact that UFOs have been seen in the areas of cattle mutilations, and some people claim to have seen them mutilate the cows, I think that almost leads us to the best hypothesis being alien, because we really don't have anything to go on for the for government involvement or for the I'm lost in words.
Cults, maybe.
For the cults, there.
Right.
Thanks.
So we don't have any basic information or evidence that would tie this in with really any of the things that we've mentioned, whether it's aliens, whether it's cults, or anything else. There's
some people that claim that the government might be involved, that's based on the fact that helicopters have been seen in the area. Other than that, they really don't have anything to go on.
Okay. You have a question for Brian, or Terry now.
Terry, has there ever been any witnesses to any satanic cult activity in the areas near the mutilated cows?
From the folks we've talked to, never. There hasn't even been a former cult member that would have blown the whistle on, his coven or whatever. And clearly, there just doesn't seem to be too much of a human element involved. It's a rather bizarre thing. And that's why I think probably a little more work still needs to be done on the tissue to determine exactly that we can eliminate any kind of viral infection, because we've witnessed in the last couple of decades some of the most amazing viruses and flus. So we may have something here that does dehydrate the animal and cause open wounds. But then we have the problem of finding out what kind of virus can cause the body to generate in excess of 300 degrees Fahrenheit of heat. And that doesn't make sense in biological terms. So this is a complex mystery, and it's something that really needs the attention of good scientists.
I think it's interesting to note, and we should let our audience know this, that just recently Mr. Bigelow, a real estate developer, has donated over, and I hope they understand this to be correct here, $1.5 million to UFO research. He's donated this money to the three major organizations. And I would certainly like to see some of this money funneled through Mrs. Howe and other, cattle mutilations experts, because I think it's very important that we set up some teams of investigators, veterinarians, and other specialized people who can be on a moment's notice call, not have to worry about the finances involved, get on a plane, whatever it takes, and get there when these animals are fresh to where we can deal with this problem and really come up with a really solid answer. I mean, if you got a cow that has its eyes removed, the cuts show signs of heat and stuff, this should be documented immediately for the research for ufology.
Sure. And ufology in general can stand a few fast action teams anyway, and this would be really a way of establishing at least a workable system of gathering evidence.
Right. We're going to show you a clip now, not in the field of cattle mutilations has it often come to the forefront, where police officers are willing to stick their necks out, and in a press conference especially, and say what they think about mutilations. In this case, we're going to show you a tape of a conference that was held back in 1973 involving Ted Oliphant, a police officer who had the blessings of the entire force when he did this press conference, and show you what his study found and the study of the police department. Yes,
89,
Pat?
I think you got the year wrong here.
Was it 89?
89.
I apologize.
Oh no, I'm sorry, it's 93.
93.
Yeah, I'm wrong
I had the
too.
3 right when the other wrong. Sorry, I apologize. 1993. And he's going to show us in this tape what he had to say at this press conference. If we could roll that tape now, I'd appreciate it.
Beginning in November of 1992, the Fife Police Department has been conducting an investigation into unexplained cattle mutilations. We've been doing this with cooperation of the local police departments and other law enforcement agencies. These reported incidents began on October 20th, 1992, and have continued through last week in Marshall and DeKalb counties. To date, over 30 animals have been discovered dead in pastures, with various internal and external organs missing. The incisions examined on these animals exhibit precise surgical cutting. In many of the cases, there has been evidence of extremely high heat on the tissue samples. Dr. Jim Armstrong, Auburn Professor of Zoology and Wildlife Science, agrees with us. He states, quote, "It would be obvious if a coyote had been tearing through. The wounds would not be similar to a smooth cut. Coyotes bite through and pull and tear away at the flesh. It would have a chewed-on look. There are other scavenger animals such as vultures that will eat at the softer regions of a cow, but there's not going to be these clean surgical type cuts. There is no way a coyote or other predator inflicted those wounds."
Can you speculate what type of high heat source would do that? And any idea? Did the universities give you any indication?
Speculation and hypothesis are not part of our criminal investigation. We're not going to guess on what's happening. All we're going to do is base our conclusions on the evidence that we've gathered and from witness testimony. We don't know what the source of the high heat is, but we certainly would like to know what's inflicting damage in excess of 300 degrees on the tissue of these animals.
What do you think?
I have no idea what's doing it to these animals, but I think we should find out.
Is not the only officer that's come forward with concrete statements about the mutilations. Tommy Cole, as you see on the screen now, has come forward and talked about these being very strange. Ron Ogletree has said he thinks they're caused by UFOs, actually, along with many of these other men who've investigated them firsthand. They've grown up in the countryside. They've been sheriffs for many years, and they're puzzled, completely puzzled by what's happened. Bill Wall actually saw a UFO, and you're looking now at Steve Benavides. Now Steve and Mr. Valedez there are looking at the animal and looking at the fact that the soft tissue, the internal organs, are never fed upon. And that's very strange, because that's what the animal really wants most of all. So it's, there are many other people we could have put on there in the way of evidence, including farmers that have spent years and years on the farm, and other detectives and so forth and so on, to validate the fact that these are strange. They don't know what's doing them. And of course, like I said earlier, they grew up in the countryside, so they know what they're talking about. And a little later in the show, we're going to show you what a predator wound looks like. And I think you'll be able to tell right away that anyone with about 20 minutes worth of training could tell what a predator wound looks like. So when you see that, you'll realize what we're up against here.
So again, as we stated, Pat, there's been no witnesses to any cult activity around these mutilations whatsoever.
No, I talked to the New Mexico head investigator yesterday. He's convinced it's not predators. Now, he's still analyzing the cult aspect of this. He hasn't been able to find any evidence, no forensics, anything like that. And he had some very unusual cases. We talk about the blood being missing. In a couple of his cases, he got to the field just hours after the animal was mutilated. They cut the animal open and took the heart out. There was absolutely no blood in the heart in either one of the cases. I think 2 cases he did that on. No blood, and the heart and the other organs were a pinkish color or a white color. There was also some other strange effects, including people that touched the animals without the aid of gloves, and their hands were burnt, and a couple of them went in the hospital. They thought they had a heptavirus, which was on the Indian reservation a couple of years ago, and there's some extraordinary things that have happened here. Now, in the way of proof, we certainly have scientific proof, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes here.
Brian, have we had any veterinarians willing to come forward that much? Is there many veterinarians out there that have been willing to come forward and put their reputation on the line about any diagnosis of these mutilated cattle?
Very few. Like Pat had said, a lot of people speak off camera and don't really want their name associated with their statements, but there are some veterinarians out there that don't know what this is. And they said that in order to get a laser, a lot of these cattle look as though they've been cut open with lasers, and they said none of them really use lasers out in the field. So they're really at a loss as to what this is.
So it's impossible to use lasers basically in the field. Yes,
let me just Dr. Lamb, who I talked to in Las Vegas, again, not a UFO person at all, examined an animal that had its skull removed, a big section of it, and there was no excision, no place to take the skull out, actually. Not only that, the animal was bloodless, as we discussed before. He took the tissue samples and x-rays to a convention in, I think it was San Francisco, and a lot of people he talked on the phone kind of thought that was funny until he saw the x-rays and the actual tissue. And then Dr. Altshuler's examined about 30 animals, I think, and he's found them that have been high heat. Now, he is associated with the UFO community, but there's been some others that have taken a hard look at it in the way, there's a fellow at Auburn University, which I think was mentioned on here. I talked to Dr. Rashke at Denver, Bob Henderson at Kansas State, several others that didn't want to go on record, in terms of their university and credentials, but they're out there and they have looked at them and they are very puzzled, to say the least.
You have a question, Peg, for one of the panel?
Well, Terry, don't you think it's kind of unusual that the police department would defend the fact that cattle mutilation are not connected with satanic cult activity?
Well, I think it's a responsible thing to do, really. If you can't find evidence that something is happening in a certain way, you certainly can't claim that that's the cause. Unfortunately, we don't always get that kind of honesty from scientific sources. The role of a scientist is really to explore and not ignore, and all too often with UFOs and cattle mutilations, we get more just turning away and making official statements by scientists, even though they don't do any investigating or researching. So it's actually a responsible thing for the police to come out and tell us what it's not, because it helps give us a better idea of what it might be.
Yes, Pat.
Well, we're going to see Dr. Creel here in just a minute, who's one of the veterinarians that's looked at a couple animals, but we have sent tissue samples, Linda has, to Oregon State University, and they have verified it's high heat and they can't tell us what has made the incisions. Also, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation has analyzed 19 animals, 9 of which were cut with a sharp instrument. Now, a lot of those animals were necrotic when they got them, and it was hard to determine what had been the cause of death. And there are some others that have done, like I mentioned, Dr. Altshuler, and there are others out there. But I just wanted to make sure we made the point. There are laboratories that have looked at them, and there are academics that have looked at these animals and are on record as saying it's not predators.
Well, let's let our viewing audience watch as Dr. Mike Creel, a veterinarian, is being interviewed by Lindo Moulton Howe, and we certainly appreciate Lindo Moulton Howe letting us show this. So let's show this interview now, gentlemen, of Lindo Moulton Howe interviewing Dr. Mike Creel.
Veterinarian Mike Creel has helped Alabama farmers for over 20 years. He is very familiar with what predators do to cows, and he knew predators had not killed the Crossville calf.
Well, generally, when predators attack a calf that age, they go for the rear quarters and the nose. You usually find a lot of tooth marks around the hocks and around the nose of the calf, and that wasn't the case in this situation.
If you were examining the cut line, could you confirm that it was done with some kind of a sharp instrument?
No, I couldn't. It was probably dead for 5 or 6 days by the time that I saw it.
Just give me some kind of feeling about how unnatural or natural the lack of blood in these excisions might be.
When I've seen animals that have been killed by dogs or other predators, there has been quite a bit of blood. That's because the animal has been disabled and the heart is still pumping, and you have open arteries and veins, and so you have blood everywhere, especially on snow-covered ground. I've seen that before, and it's very bad. But if the animal were killed and then someone would come back later and remove these parts, then I wouldn't think that you would see that much blood unless they hit a major vessel.
If you were shown that at least 20 or 30 animals in the United States and Canada had excisions like we found in Alabama, and a pathologist showed that the hemoglobin had been cooked, what would your reaction be to that fact?
If there's some new procedure, some new instrument, especially something that's done in the field.
What would be the occasion when you would have access to a laser instrument or something that was hot?
I wouldn't. I don't have anything like that in my practice dealing with cattle. We have electrocautery units for small animals for surgical procedures, but you're dealing with mucous membranes and open tissue. Certainly nothing that I would have in my clinic would cut through the hide of a cow.
Absolutely nothing.
Not that I know of, other than a post-mortem knife or a scalpel.
Welcome back. The Oregon State Diagnostic Test, Pat, what is that all about? And that was a very interesting tape there, and we don't get too many veterinarians that are willing to do that for us. What's that all about?
Well, they confirmed what Linda was saying on that piece of tape right there, that in fact that it was a cookie cutter serrated edge, which is found in many of these animals. It was done with high heat, over 300 degrees, which has been mentioned a couple of times in these tapes. But they couldn't find any real cause. In other words, they didn't know exactly what had done it. One thing, we do have now a backpack type of a laser that could be used, but it would not be capable of making the wounds that we saw, and it's just a recent development here in the last couple of years that's come out. So when you go back to 65, I think lasers were first demonstrated, I believe at Ohio State or somewhere like that, in 65. So what's been doing it all these years?
The unit itself is as large as a refrigerator.
Yeah, it's enormous, and it takes 4 or 5 people to operate that unit. So that really doesn't add up at all, how they could do that in the field and leave no forensics, not a cigarette butt, not a hair from their head, nothing.
And another thing that you have to keep in mind is that this is highly special equipment. This is very special equipment, and would be easy to trace if there are cults or groups that are out there purchasing this kind of equipment, and nobody can find any kind of paper trail to lead them to find anyone that's buying this kind of equipment.
You have to understand too, and I think Brian wants to comment about some of the things he's found here, but the FBI has told us repeatedly there are no organized cults, and it's all a myth, and you see this on many TV shows and talk shows and what have you. And so who could conceivably do these mutilations, not only in Alabama and 38 states, I think, in the Union, Canada, Puerto Rico, 250 sheep in France, horses in England, and the list goes on and on and on and on, with the same type of wounds. Now, I'm open for any reasonable answer, but I don't think there's a cult out there that has that kind of resources that we don't know anything about. That brings us probably to the government, and I know Brian's done a lot of freedom of information work, so
tell us about that.
Interestingly enough, when Rommel, who was an ex-FBI agent, when he was doing his investigation, which pretty much stated that there was really nothing to this that was extraordinary, it was pretty much just predator. But while he was doing his investigation, Los Alamos National Laboratories in New Mexico, which is a Department of Energy facility, they were doing an investigation also. And they supplied a lot of the data to Rommel for his investigation. Now, Los Alamos said that they did their investigation prior to Rommel's involvement and throughout Rommel's involvement, and I believe even afterwards. So if they did come to a conclusion like Rommel did, I don't see why they would continue to collect the data and investigate. And as of yet, we haven't been able to get a hold of any of the data that Los Alamos has, but we're working on that right now, so hopefully we'll be able to get something from them.
Any other government work being done, or that
Well, Federal Aviation there have been reports, as we have mentioned, on the black helicopters. Sometimes they're black, sometimes they have green helicopters sighted. But they, I believe, did an investigation, didn't they, Pat, in Colorado?
Well, they did one and denied that they ever did it. It would not supply. In fact, it was announced in the paper. I got the newspaper clippings and everything. They also announced one in Alabama, and I filed Freedom of Information requests there and never got a return answer. And until recently, the first time we've ever got an answer back to acknowledge that they had anything other than a sheet of paper that said that they had looked in it briefly was just this past week when we got an answer to a Freedom of Information request that acknowledges that they did do this particular work, but it's kind of expensive, too expensive for our little band of people to afford getting the...
Too expensive to secure these copies.
To get the documents, right.
Right.
You know, and Tom Adams, who's been very helpful, is a researcher out west, and I've got a report here where he's done 200 sightings of helicopters around mutilations, much greater than chance would be. It's either helicopters or UFOs or strange lights in almost every one of these cases. And in fact, a couple of these cases, the helicopters chased the sheriff. And this was witnessed by another sheriff in 2 separate cases. They radioed for help, and another sheriff came to the scene, and there's this helicopter chasing a police car. So there's been some really strange things with these. Now, only the government, I think, would have that kind of research.
I assume these helicopters were unmarked. Am I correct in saying
they're unmarked? Yes, absolutely. And when I talked to the New Mexico fellow yesterday, Jerry Valerio, he told me the same thing. Still seeing them, still unmarked.
One thing, if this is a government operation that's doing this cattle mutilation, why is it occurring worldwide?
Right.
That's that really can't be answered. If it is the government, then why would this be a worldwide phenomenon?
You bring up a good point, Brian. I want to tell our viewers it's one thing to talk about a cattle mutilation out west in another part of the world, but right now we're going to talk about a cattle mutilation that occurred right here in Ohio, in central Ohio. We're going to show you a clip.
I think we got a predator tape.
Yeah, we do have some, but
we had one to show the difference between predators. I don't know. We're going to do that or not, but
we're going to show that afterwards, I believe.
Oh, okay.
We would like to show right now is a clip of an investigation done by Peggy Tillman, a UFO researcher and investigator, who's going to be one of our guests here shortly. And she did a very good investigation back in 1973 of a cattle mutilation. I believe the gentleman's name was Mr. Blakesley, Mr. James Blakesley, and he had told Peggy about a cattle mutilation that occurred on his farm, I believe it was. He's a professional person, and he's also a farmer, and reported this to Peggy, and I believe Peggy went out and investigated this, did an interview with the gentleman, and came up with some very unusual statements by this gentleman on this tape. So if we have time now, let's roll this tape right now.
I think it was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Must have been around 2 or 3, yeah. So it was in the summer, about 1990, I guess, and we had a few sheep out back, and left one morning and came back about 4 hours later, and one of the sheep was lying on its side out here. And I went out to see what was wrong, and it was dead. And while examining it for some signs of injury or anything, I noticed that the tongue had been cut out. I thought initially an animal had chewed it, took it down and chewed it up, but there was no evidence of blood, no wounds of any kind on the animal, and the eyes were also missing. And so I called the sheriff's office to report it. I thought someone had killed it because it was in good health prior to that. And then I called a local veterinarian to come over and take a look also, and the veterinarian came over and was also puzzled, and took the head and from the animal before we had it removed, and found nothing unusual from the head. So really I have no idea what caused the death of the sheep, and it was just a very unusual event.
You say these were clean cuts, though?
Yeah, they were
like
clean cuts.
Like a surgical instrument?
Well, it looked like it could have been cut with an instrument, sure. And there was no blood. That was the other thing. No blood on the sheep, and no blood on the ground around it where it was down. So I'm not quite sure what was going on. That's why I called the sheriff's department and a veterinarian to come and look at it. Now, what I thought had happened originally was that maybe some animal had taken it down, and then, you know, they like select organs to chew on, and I thought maybe they had chewed it, but it was too clean cut. There was not a gnaw mark or anything, or teeth marks. No.
Could you tell if there's any signs of struggle?
Not that I could tell. I didn't really look for it, and there was no, the grass was not beat down all around it. The animal just was down, period. And that's why it was sort of strange, I thought, too. You know.
Did the other animals act up?
No, the other animals seemed in their normal behavior. Of course, they're not the world's smartest animals either, you know. And but they were all just grazing out there.
Welcome back to UFO Update Live. I'd like to introduce our guest right now, our special guest, Jim Donahoe, UFO researcher and investigator from Central Ohio. Thanks for being here, Jim.
Thank you for letting
Peggy
me.
Tillman is the Coast Section State Director for Mutual UFO Network, also a UFO researcher and investigator in Central Ohio, and many thanks for being here, Peggy.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
Peggy, we just saw your interview there that you did, and with this gentleman, and by the way, this was in 1990. I do want to correct that. It was in 1990 Peggy did this interview.
Yes.
What were the findings, the end results in this investigation, Peggy, you know, since 1990? What are your findings, and what do you consider really happened there?
Well, like I said, back in 1990, my husband and I got a phone call from this gentleman, and we went out to his house, and he stated, well, something very strange had happened, and he said within a 4-hour span of my going away and coming back, he said there was the sheep out in the middle of the field. They went out and they checked on it, and they found out that the cornea had been removed from the sheep. The tongue was removed. Also, there was no blood, and that they had this veterinarian from the local hospital there in London, Ohio, to come in, and he said he couldn't figure out what was wrong either. They said that it was such a clean cut, like someone knew what they were doing. They had to have very high-powered instruments in order to accomplish this. So they cut the sheep's head off, and they took it in for tests and things, but as of today, he's never got back the report. And I have checked with this veterinarian clinic, and so far they will not call me back.
Oh, so they won't return your call?
They haven't as yet.
Was this in daylight this happened?
Yes, this happened in daylight. Yes, it did.
There was in other words, this had happened years before up there too, hadn't it?
Yes, but it was the cattle that had been around Arbuckle Road. There were UFOs spotted. There were cattle that disappeared. There were cattle that were mutilated with the organs taken out and no blood. And there was also, in '73, there was the same type of thing that had happened. And the police, State Highway Patrol, the local sheriff's office, they were all out on 142, I'm sorry. And this man and woman coming from West Jefferson were close enough that they got out of the car and they seen this cattle. It was sort of tilted on its side, facing the road, so they could see that the cow had one leg up in the air to where they said it looked like somebody had taken something so sharp that it actually dug clear into the bone and removed organs clear up, straight up the belly of this cow. So when I got home, I had passed this area and I didn't know what was going on. So I called this person and she told me what she had saw. So the next day, my ex-father-in-law worked for the veterinaries in London, Ohio, and he said that he had to help with this cow. And I asked him, I said, well, can you tell me exactly what was going on? And he said, well, I can just tell you that there was no blood, there was no organs, that there was some kind of a very high intense instrument that was used on this cow, And he said, and also I was told I am not to talk about it, so I don't want to lose my job.
Okay. Jim, you have an interesting story that goes along with that. There were some observations made at that time in the area?
Well, the Arbuckle Road incident that Peggy mentioned with the cattle mutilation, proximate time of the cattle mutilation on Arbuckle, there was also a human abduction within a few weeks or a few months of that mutilation itself. Mr. Blakesley lives within probably a quarter to a half mile of the London Correctional Institute, the old prison farm up there. And when his sheep was mutilated, about approximately the same time, there were lights seen over LCI for 2 or 3 nights. The Highway Patrol had helicopters come in to try and find out what it was, and the lights were not there when the helicopters got there. Okay. Of course, the London Correction, or the Lebanon Correction, has had lights 2 different times over them too.
I see. Jim, don't you have a newsletter that you put out periodically?
Yes, I do. I started a newsletter a few months ago. It's called Equinox, and it is for national as well as Ohio. I try to get more Ohio and local stories in it than anything else, but I do national and international also.
Okay. Okay. How often does that come out, Jim?
It's monthly, and I believe you have my address here, so if anyone's interested, all they have to do is contact you here at the station, and I can give them a free copy.
Okay, I think our producer's going to show that at the end of our show, so people will know how to contact you and see about getting the subscription to your newsletter. Right. Really appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Peggy, was there been any other occurrences with this gentleman, Mr. James Blakesley? Any other occurrences on his farm since 1990?
No, I have checked with him, and he said that was about the only time that anything had happened. He said that he heard that happened to one of the horses down the road, but he said he didn't get the details on it. But he said he does remember seeing lights over the prison farm.
I see.
And also there's always a lot of activity around 665, which is known as UFO Highway, because of so many incidents.
Have either of you been involved in any other mutilations or even stories about them close in the area where maybe other investigators investigated and you heard about it in your general area?
There has been other mutilations there. I have never taken part in any investigations on mutilations myself, but I have heard of a few over the years, say for the last 15 years.
I see. Pat, what do you think about all this?
Well, like I said, Jerry,
local.
Well, you know, we've got them locally, and it happens all around the country, and it's amazing, as Peggy said, and Jim, there's usually lights associated or some strange craft that no one can identify, and it's pretty amazing, really. And I was mentioning earlier, a lot of the forensics, the only forensics that we've ever found are tripod marks and things along that line, that were in hard brick type earth. We take a shovel to make these marks. So I really don't know what to think. We did have at one time, and I don't know if we're going to get to it tonight, we had procured a book about what animals do, predators do to other animals. And the amazing thing is that once you look at this and you see what a predator does, you know that there's no way a predator has attacked these animals and made those perfect circular incisions and left the interior, the intestines and other things alone in these animals. It just doesn't happen that way, and that's not the way predators behave. Now, you know, you may have a predator kill several animals and leave some alone, but it's extraordinarily strange. You know, it really is.
Peggy, you know, Mr. Bill Jones is a director of MUFON, state director.
Yes.
Do you think he's prepared up there in central and northern Ohio to handle any mutilation case that may come along in the near future? I mean, is he able to handle this in terms of financial and also manpower and veterinarians and everything else?
Well, I know that Mr. Jones is trying to get all this organization together, but it's like you said, that without the funds, there's not much you can do. And my husband, he also works with me, Larry Tillman, and we just do the investigation on our own, out of our own pocket, because there's never been any funds.
Yes, Pat.
Well, I was talking to Bill not long ago, the state director from MUFON, and they had a case which echoes a case that I was told about just yesterday in New Mexico, where they had 3 animals that were next to the barn in a corral. All these animals were ready to calve. And overnight, the animals' calves disappeared. In other words, they weren't born yet, and there was no blood, no afterbirth, no anything. And they were in a corral within about 60, 70 yards of the house and right next to the barn. And coincidentally, when I was talking to the New Mexico investigator yesterday, they had one that was in a stall, locked in a barn, ready to calve. And when he came out the next day, the calf was missing, and there was no signs. The animal could not have gotten out of the stall. No one knows what happened. No straw disturbed, no nothing. So there are some very
really
bizarre
strange
happenings going on here.
I agree. Listen, panel, we have a caller on the phone. Gary, you're on UFO Update.
Yes, hello.
Hello to you. What's your question?
My question is, I seem to have read something about this phenomena years ago, and my recollection is that this has been going on for over 100 years. Now, the source of this was in the Fordian phenomena collected by Charles Ford, and there were a number of books written in the 60s, and they had different sections, and this was always a section in any of the books that I looked at. Powers and a number of authors had different books, but they were really mostly compilations of just Fordian phenomena. Has anyone looked back and seen this, maybe not as frequent as now, but some of the first reported cases in the newspapers going back maybe 100 years?
Well, Gary, first of all, there was one really famous case that really got blown out of proportion, at least that's my opinion. It was, I believe, in 1897 in Kansas when allegedly this gentleman practically seemed like they tried to pretend like everyone in the whole town seen this cow lifted up into this craft. Right. And it turns out later that this gentleman was well known for being a hoaxer, even though it supposedly was documentation, people had signed affidavits and stuff. So most people don't hold much credence to that particular lifting of this cow into this UFO type craft. You have a thought, Pat?
Well, yeah, Jerome Clark, who's a pretty well-known writer of strange phenomena, looked into that, and he was able to debunk most of the earlier mutilations and what have you. But what we're dealing with now is we have records, photographs and necropsy records and things like that going back to '62. Now, I was told by Tom Adams that he's working on a case that goes back to 1947. So what we try to deal with is a documentation that absolutely proves that it happened. And the newspaper is not a good source for us as far as I'm concerned. That's why we go the extra mile and look into, no matter if it's Lindo Moulton Howe or who it is, we try to find our own evidence as best we can to validate what's going on. Now, in fact, I even talked to the senator's office in New Mexico about this.
Right, that's interesting.
They told me, the senator's office told me, it's definitely not predators, which is a big breakthrough, believe me. So
the earliest known date that would seem to be supportable would be 1947.
Well, we don't have the records for those yet. They're trying to locate them because it's so long ago. They haven't been able to do that, and I have my sincere doubts whether they're going to be able to validate that date. But that's what they're looking at right now. Yeah.
If so, that would be a pretty consequential date for a lot of other things starting.
Well, yeah, it's coincidental, of course, with Roswell and quite a number of things. You're right about that. So it would be significant in that respect. You know, really, the jury's out about what's really doing this. I haven't bought into the alien hypothesis completely. It could be the government. It could be a biological experiment gone wrong. It could be a cult. I guess there's still a remote possibility of that. But like I say, certainly when you dig into it personally, you'll find out it's really flabbergasting, some of the facts you find out and some of the academics you'll run into that are willing to talk to you and to tell you some remarkable stories that they've been involved in. I talked to one academic that had 6 animals that were mutilated and laid out in a straight line across the field. That's pretty amazing, and this was done in soft sand, and there was not a footprint, nothing. No signs that the animals have been dropped, no broken ribs on the animals, nothing. So how was it done? I don't know. I also talked to the same fellow about another mutilation, and they checked the branches of the trees and what have you, and there was no signs that there was any hide stripped from the cow, dropped through the tree, and the animal was laying right under the tree. Now, how it got there, they don't know. But they've been done in snow and other types of environment that just defies explanation. So, but as far as documentation, it's tough to come by. It really is. And as Peggy mentioned, getting a report back from a veterinarian and people like that, they just don't answer your calls when you call back. They just don't want to be a part of it in any sense. You know, their reputation's on the line. So I can't really blame them for that. They spend a lot of time in school, and their interest is in making money and taking advantage of their education. Why shouldn't it be? But our interests are different, so that's where we clash.
Are people in other parts of the country having the same black helicopter hysteria that we're having here, the ones that mention seeing helicopters related to these incidents? In other words, in Colorado, are a lot of people talking about the black helicopters the way they are here, and then are they related to the mutilations in the same way? Or is in Colorado the only thing they're talking about is the helicopters in relation to the mutilations, and in no other sense the way they are here?
Well, this book right here, compiled by Tom Adams, over 200 cases of helicopters, mostly black helicopters, unmarked. I think what we're experiencing here in Ohio is primarily hysteria. We've taken somewhat of a look into that, and we're still investigating it, but I'm by no means convinced that there's all this talk about the government taking over and everything else. I don't put much credence in the New World Order and what have you.
In it either.
Yeah, but
I just wondered if people.
Yeah, they're seeing the helicopters, most certainly.
Same hysteria, and maybe this is related in some way to what they're talking about, or if this is just something that's coming up completely original in different parts of the country.
Well, let me just say this: they formed vigilante committees out west, and they fired on this hysteria on numerous occasions.
So. Yes.
I don't know. Yeah, I think there is some hysteria involved. I just don't know to what degree.
I feel if the government will not admit that the black helicopters exist, then you couldn't possibly shoot one down then.
No, you couldn't. Well, they exist. They exist, and they have good reason to exist for nighttime operations and other things. We know that.
Thank you very much, caller, for your question. Do you have a comment, Jim?
Just a real short point on history. As far as the mutilations, finding animal parts, human parts, etc., you can go clear back to the 1100s. There are some writings in some of the abbeys from England out around London that have incidents where body parts of animals and pieces of flesh have fallen from the sky.
Appreciate that.
So.
To Lynn here if we can.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming to the end of our hour here. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Len Stringfield is in the hospital. In fact, I guess he's home now, but he's very seriously ill. Len Stringfield, if most of you should know his name, all of us here certainly on the panel do, and everyone in ufology. Len has been a UFO investigator for 40 years. He is the #1 man in this area as far as I am concerned, and he just received the Isabel Davis Award from the Fund for UFO Research, which means he has been given the award as the person best lending to find out the answer to the UFO phenomena in the last 10 years, and he well deserves it. It's a long time in coming. And all I can say is the best of health, the best of everything to Mr. Leonard Stringfield, because he's just a top-notch guy all the way around. Our newsletter, Terry Anders has done a terrific job on this newsletter, everyone. It's a 10-page newsletter. If you want to learn more about the newsletter and how you can get it, we'll show you and flash you his number and his address at the end of the show. But it's a 10-page one this time, so you don't want to miss it. You have to call Terry or write him and ask him how you can go about securing this, okay? Peggy, you have a support group meeting coming up, a dinner. Just real quickly tell the audience when this is coming and how they can find out about it.
Our meeting for the month of December is not going to take place at the library in Milford. This month we decided, because of the Christmas season, to have it at the local restaurant. And if you want further information, call Jerry or myself.
Right. We want to take this opportunity really to thank our guests, Jim Donahoe, Peggy Tillman. We want to thank both of you so much for coming on the show this evening. I want to say this is the end of the first year of UFO Update. I want to thank all the people behind the camera, Bob, Glenn, Zach, and everyone. They've done a terrific job. We think each show has gotten better. We think from the letters we've received from you people and the acknowledgments we get and calls we get that we're getting more viewers all the time. This gentleman here, Pat Packard, and Brian Scow, who's off camera now, and Terry Enders have done a tremendous job just in this whole year, guys. I really appreciate it. Peggy and I thank you from the bottom of our hearts for a tremendous job. We thank you for your support out there. In the coming year of 1995, we're going to be dealing with some interesting topics. We're going to talk about even Bigfoot. Jim might be back to give us some discussion on Bigfoot. We're going to talk about the Gulf Breeze sightings, Ed Walters. Is Ed Walters' photographs of 41 photographs, is that really genuine or is it a hoax? Okay, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the abduction of 3 women in 1976 in Kentucky. Is that really a real story? We got a lot of exciting things coming up for you. We just want to thank you for staying with us for this year of 1994. And we won't be coming back to you, of course, until January of 1995. So we want to take this time from myself and all the panel here, from Jim and Peggy, to wish all of you a very, very Merry Christmas and a very, very happy holiday season. Thank you so much for watching UFO Update Live.
Now, just here this late summer, rather early spring, one of the investigators I've been working with for 5 years dropped in the office, and we discussed what was new. And he said, well, the thing is now, I'll tell you. He says, and I'm inclined to agree with him, that who is doing this now is very possibly creatures not of this planet. Now, that, you know, that shakes you up a little bit. Creatures not of this planet. You know, you're thinking of Buck Rogers and things like this. But that's the way it is seriously right now. That it's very, very possible that these mutilations are being done by creatures from outer space.
If extraterrestrials are the ones mutilating animals, what do you think the implications are then for this planet?
Throughout the mutilations, all of us involved have been concerned with the possibility of the mutilations going from animals to human beings. Understandable. Thank God to this point it hasn't happened. Whatever they're doing with the portions of these animals they are taking, I haven't the slightest idea. There's a reason for it. It's not haphazard. There's a pattern to it. I don't know. I think it's a wait-and-see game. What else can we do? If we do have beings from outer space doing this, with the capabilities to do things like this, what can we as a human race do? If they have the knowledge and the technology that it looks like they have, we're powerless. So maybe it's a wait-and-see game. I can't see anything else to do.